Hi, before we get into this video, I forgot to mention that two things in the original recording session for this video. Number one, this is the last episode of Tryout Season 3 before we get to the follow-up next week, so look forward to that next week. Last episode of the season. And second, there should be a Raps Bites coming out on this same day, so keep your eye on the channel for that, if that's a thing that you want to see. Talk about some games that I reviewed on the tryout show. A lot of games I reviewed on the tryout show, at some point, there's a final conclusions in that video for them. So check that out if you want to have some closure. Anyway, to the actual video. Hey guys, Max 92 and welcome back to another tryout. Today's tryout is on Dragon Ball The Breakers and Evil Dead the Game. These are just two games I happened to acquire around the same time. Not exactly. We've had Dragon Ball The Breakers for a little bit, and then Evil Dead the Game was part of the PlayStation Plus games for the month of February, so I was like, I might as well throw that in and do both of these games because they are both asynchronous multiplayer titles, and you know, they're both very different stylistically, so it might be interesting to see what how they match up against each other and look at them as in a comparative way. I've done this before with a video I did a while back where I compared Dead by Daylight to Friday the 13th. They'll get a link in the card if you want to check that out. And so I'm doing it again with another pair of asynchronous multiplayer games, and since the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game doesn't exist yet, we're doing these two. First up is Dragon Ball The Breakers, which you can see all the junk here on the thing. I'll talk about that in a second. Dragon Ball The Breakers, like I mentioned at the beginning, asynchronous multiplayer. This is a 7 versus 1 game where you have 7 survivors versus a raider. The raiders are Cell, Boo, and Frieza. I think those are the only ones, if I remember looking through. There are a handful of maps, and it's interesting. I'll talk about it in a little. The reason that I have this game is because my girlfriend wanted this thing, this Cell shell figure that is holding a bunch of my Dragon Ball figures, because it's how we display it. I don't know if you can get this separately in some capacity. When it came in the special edition, I feel like all this was just in like a normal box, and then this was in that box. So this might be acquirable separately, but my girlfriend wanted this, so we pre-ordered it. It was like $70 or something, which is cheap for a collector's edition. But that's because the standard edition of this game is $20 digitally. The special edition, which is what this is here, is $30 digitally, but looking on Bandai Namco's website, the special edition to get a physical copy of it like this is only $20 as well. It's a very cheap game. The figure was like $50 basically, and figures are expensive, so that sounds about right for something like that. But the special edition comes with, or the limited edition, or whatever it's called, comes with the Cell shell, this steelbook, and then the regular physical copy in here with a code for some downloadable content. It's some costume pieces for your survivor, a victory pose, and a vehicle skin, which it's just a bunch of cosmetic stuff, because that's where the most of the monetization lies in this game. And we'll talk about that as well in a little bit. My biggest question is, why is this game? Like, I don't know who exactly was asking for this sort of asynchronous multiplayer game, but with Dragon Ball, you know, you see scenes where the big bad of the arc is devastating just a normal town, and maybe some people would be like, I want to see it from the town perspective, but I can't think of very many people who would prefer that. It's kind of strange. And by the by, looking at it, like, this is doing the style of the Dragon Ball Xenoverse games, and it can in fact connect up with Xenoverse 2, which I have on Xbox, so I don't know what its connectivity does. So I couldn't connect this one because this is a PlayStation 4 version. I have it on the I have Xenoverse 2 on the Xbox that I played a bunch a long time ago. I feel like this looks worse than Xenoverse 2 overall. It's been a long time since I've played Xenoverse 2, so I don't have the strongest memory of what that game looks like, but I don't remember it looking quite as iffy as this. This game looks really cheap, which it's a very inexpensive game, so I imagine it didn't have the highest budget. And I feel like that comes through in the way that the game plays as well. The movement is kind of slow and stiff feeling, especially at first before you really get used to it. And it has this really long prologue tutorial thing that's like 20 minutes long or something that I get that it's trying to explain to you all of the concepts, but I feel like it doesn't even go in depth far enough to explain all the concepts. There was stuff that when I first started playing online matches, I was like, what are we doing? What am I supposed to be doing? And you still have to like take time to play matches with people in order to really get a grasp on what's going on. Overall, I do think the game is fine, but it's got a lot more like loose threads than I feel like other games of this genre has. And your survivors have several win conditions or escape conditions. You know, you've got your primary win condition, I believe, which is just start the time machine and get out of here. Because this is, like I mentioned, it's connected to Dragon Ball Xenoverse. You know anything about that. It's time travel shenanigans. And so this is also related time travel shenanigans where you're sort of being stuck in this space between time, and for some reason Dragon Ball villain is there destroying things, and you want to try to not die and restart this time machine thing so that you can get everyone out of there, basically. That's your primary win condition. But you can also win by just killing the raider, because getting into some of the other wrinkles, you have the ability to, I don't remember what the concept is called, but you can transform into characters from the Dragon Ball series, essentially. So you can get out of a gacha, I'll talk about that later, these souls or whatever there are of the fighting spirit of various Dragon Ball characters, and they have certain skills, and you can equip the skills and their attacks and stuff, and then you can use those to fight against the raider once you've gained enough power or whatever through the match. And so you can just kill the raider. That can just be a win condition. There's also, after a while, if it's just been going on for a while and the raider is winning, you can find these emergency time travel machines that will start popping up, that trunks will start appearing into the world that you can then use to escape the match, which isn't a win, a total win, but it's not a total loss either. So there's just a lot of like loose threads, it feels like. There's a lot of, you can use the Dragon Balls to wish for things. I haven't gotten to do it yet, so I don't know what you can exactly wish for. But you can use the Dragon Ball to wish for things, both as the raider and as the survivors. There's money you collect within the bounds of a normal game that you then use to buy things within the map. There are other NPC survivors that you can find and rescue by transporting them out. So there's just like a lot of loose threads floating around in this game that just makes it feel a bit messier. It doesn't really make it not fun. It's still generally fun to play. I played a handful of matches. I think my playtime ended up being like 2 hours, but there was a decent chunk of that was the prologue and then messing around with the menus and the customization and the gacha and that sort of stuff to see what those things were like. So I probably was more closer to like an hour and a half. I think I played like 4 matches or something. And so I didn't get a chance to play as the raider because you can't queue specifically for one or the other. You can basically prefer one or the other. And I did a couple matchmaking queues preferring the raider, but I didn't get in as one. So I don't have any experience playing as the raider. I didn't want to play for several hours just to see it. But despite that, it seems like player counts were decent. It didn't take that long to get a match overall. So there are people playing it, and I think it's cross-platform as well. So that was probably going to help a lot with player numbers. So like, it's not a dead game by any stretch of the imagination, which is interesting because I've not heard that much about it. The biggest issue with it, I think, is its post-monetization. The game is cheap, but it's not free. And so there's already like a resistance to monetization from a player base, and I think the way that this game goes about it is a little reaching pay to win. You do have your typical cosmetic things that you can purchase, but you can purchase, I don't know what they're called, they're just TP, the TP points or whatever. You can purchase these, they're the microtransaction currency. You can also earn them via playing the game, but you earn more, you can get more of them by purchasing them, because earning them through gameplay is slow. That's fine and dandy if these were specifically and only used to get the cosmetic items, but they aren't. You can use the TP in the gacha, and the stuff you get out of the gacha are things that affect gameplay. And that's where it starts to be iffy, and where it starts to lean a bit more towards pay to win potentially. It is still a gacha, so you're gambling, rather. You're gambling for the potential to get a better thing that can help you win better, which makes it worse. But I think that line is what makes it not quite pay to win, but it's still a bad thing. Because what you get out of the gacha is you get, like, there's souls or whatever of the different characters that have different attributes. Because you can unlock a character, but you only unlock, like, an attribute or, like, a costume or something, it seems. And so, like, you can unlock, like, some passive skill for, let's say, Android 18. But then, like, if you roll Android 18 in the gacha a different time, you might this time be getting an active skill instead. And so you can get these out of the gacha. They make your character stronger when they transform. They give them more abilities. And the passive skills can be equipped for just general gameplay, not just when you're transformed. So it's this very, like, towing the line of pay to win, but it's definitely gambling. You know, you're definitely gambling for the ability to potentially get a better thing so that you are stronger when you're playing the game against other people. So it's like really scummy monetization. And I think that really drags the game down a lot to where I'm not sure I'd even recommend it, even though I do think the game is fun and it's not expensive. Even though I might play it more since I already have it here, I probably am going to fail it because I don't think I can recommend it because of that monetization. Like, even if you get a bunch of tickets and whatever for playing, you know, I logged in for like the first time and there was a bunch of tickets and currency so that I could get customization items and I could get, you know, I could run the gacha a handful of times and get some nice stuff out of it. It's still like, yeah, ew, like, I don't think that I should recommend this to people because that's a bit over the line in terms of being gambling and also pay to win. And I want to say that I don't personally mind the existence of gachas in games. The problem comes when you can pay real money to use them, because now you're affecting real life. You know, now you're affecting real people. I, you know, like to run a gacha here and there. It can be fun to just be like, oh, hey, a random thing that triggers the brain reward system a little bit. So, like, I don't personally want to go, remove every gacha everywhere. Don't get rid of every mystery box. But there are people with gambling problems who have trouble controlling themselves. And the industry over the last several years has been greatly taking advantage of people like that. That's where it becomes a problem because it starts ruining people's lives. We shouldn't stand for payable loot boxes and gacha systems in games really anymore. Even in like free-to-play games, I think it's about time where we sort of get as far away as possible from this form of monetization in the industry. That's just like my opinion, man. So that's really the gist of what I had to say about Dragon Ball The Breakers. It's a weird game that is kind of fun, but I probably don't recommend because it has some pretty borderline pay-to-win gambling systems. So yeah, that's that. So now we're gonna flop over to the other game. The other game being Evil Dead the Game. I was playing the PS5 copy. I got it through PS Plus, And Evil Dead the game is a 4v1 asynchronous multiplayer game, so it's more like other ones you've probably played. Evolve, Dead by Daylight, Friday the 13th, etc. The more common ones. I'm not the most familiar with Evil Dead source material. I've read Marvel Zombies vs. the Army of Darkness at one point, and that's about it. I've not personally seen any of the movies or read any of the other comics or anything, but I've sort of know about Evil Dead enough to see what its aesthetics look like and all that. And I feel like this game does a really good job of sort of recreating those aesthetics into a video game, an interactive medium. There's one thing that I think is not quite there, and I think that it's the sound design. It's not quite up to the snuff of a lot of sound design in horror media these days. It's not the worst sound design, it's just sort of, at least how I was playing it here, using the PS5 plugged into my monitor in here with my speakers in here, and the 3D audio space just wasn't quite working properly for me in here. Talking about gameplay, combat is kind of clunky, but it's enough to what it needs to be. An issue that I noticed a lot, playing as a survivor at least, is that you can get pretty easily stun-locked by deadites. That it's just sort of okay, what do you expect for me to do? They will stagger you out of animations, and then you will just sort of be in a stagger animation, and they might hit you again, and you're still in the stagger animation, which is kind of punishing for something that I don't think is that serious, overly serious. It's a bit splatstick, is, kind of what it is. And so you've got one-liners and you got some stuff that's kind of silly, but I feel like it's a bit overly punishing in some ways as a survivor. It's hard, I feel to balance these sorts of games in a way that's truly equal. I played for over 2 hours. It might have been even close to 3 hours by the time it was done, because I played 2 matches as a survivor, a match as the Kandarian Demon. I played some of the Splatter Royale, which is new, and I played a little bit of the single-player content, including the tutorial also. So it came out to be 2 hours and 45 minutes, I think, by the time I stopped recording. And all of these things really have separate queues. So you can queue up to play as a survivor. You can queue up to play as the Kandarian Demon. You can queue up for Splatter Royale on its own. And there's even other queues for other things. There's an exploration mode. There's modes versus AI. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do. And I found that playing as Survivor and playing as the Demon are both fun experiences. You will have longer queue times as the Kandarian Demon, and Splatter Royale just seems like it almost doesn't work in terms of matchmaking. It took me a really long time to get matchmaking to put me in a match, which I won. I won that match, but it took a really long time for it to actually put me in one where it wasn't kicking me out of the lobby or whatever, so it was weird. Overall, the game, though, is pretty straightforward, and I think it has a decent amount of offline and single-player content. Like I mentioned, there are these offline missions, which I played a little bit of one, and I got kind of annoyed because I died, and you have to start the whole thing over again when you die. There's also, like I said, the playing against AI, which I think is really good for the longevity of a game like this. The game is relatively cheap at $40, and the post-monetization, after you buy in at $40, is characters in costumes, and it's like buying an expansion pass. It's buying DLC, in a traditional way, which is, it's an ongoing game, so it's going to have some kind of post-monetization, but I generally prefer this sort of thing to battle passes and microtransactions, because, you can just spend $25 and get all the characters and costumes all at once, and that's that. You've bought it. It's an expansion DLC. There's not a battle pass or anything from what I can tell in this game, and I appreciate that because I don't like battle passes. I don't like microtransactions. I do tend to be less likely to buy in DLC. I feel like that's because they're bigger purchases. It's a lot easier to make those microtransaction purchases and those battle pass purchases because they're generally cheaper. But I prefer, for the health of the industry, DLC like this. I like this game because it feels relatively pick up and play. You can just sort of go, I want to play a match of Evil Dead the game. You hop in, you play a match, and that's it. There's nothing being play more. There's no annoying daily challenge systems that encourage you to never stop. You know, the game doesn't feel like it needs you to play it every moment of every day, like a lot of other live service games. Even Dragon Ball The Breakers has these challenge and whatever systems to encourage you to keep playing constantly. And those things are fatiguing as a player. I don't generally play a lot of these live service games more than like a little bit when events come around. So it's nice to come against one that doesn't really have that annoying quality. Because that I'm gonna keep it installed, I might play it some more, and I think the game passes its tryout, really. I don't have a lot to say about it. I think that it's a really nice homage to its source material, and despite it being strange that they made an asynchronous multiplayer game out of Evil Dead, I think it generally works because it sort of incorporates that scrappiness that I feel like is in the Evil Dead series. Like I said, I'm not that familiar, but you know, I know that Ash Williams at various points has a shotgun and a chainsaw, and so you can do those things, you can interact with the game in that way, you can fight back to an extent, and it really gives it a different vibe to some of the other popular asynchronous multiplayer games where you're very actively fighting back rather than more passively fighting back. Even, you know, Dead by Daylight, Friday the 13th, or the sort of predecessors, where you very passively fighting back in those. But yeah, that's all I had to say about both of those games. The differences that really make me put these at different places are the monetization systems. And that's really why I failed one and not the other for the most part, because I had fun with both of them. They're different enough games with different enough loops that I can recommend them separately. Like, they're not identical, but Evil Dead obviously won the matchup. That's just how it went because of, again, monetization. But the audiences probably don't overlap too much of these two things. Anyway, end bits. Like description, links, beacons.ai link, all my stuff in that. Like the video if you like it, dislike if you didn't. Subscribe when I'm keeping this on other shows. I do all sorts of stuff on the channel, so subscribe and you'll see those things. Like, leave a comment. What do you think about these two games? Have you played any other asynchronous multiplayer games? Share the video. Do the things. And anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!